Right, this is the first lesson in Unit 4 of Weimar Nazi Germany. And today's lesson is going to be focusing on women in Nazi Germany. So we're going to look at three things today. Look at the Nazis' ideal of a woman, so what they expected. Look at how the Nazis made women feel important to their regime, and assess how successful Nazi policies were towards women. Now, before we start this, you are going to complete these questions in your book because we're going to do a quick overview of Unit 3. I'm not going to give you the answers in this PowerPoint or in this presentation because I want to see that you've done it, and we'll check it when you come back to school. So there are 10 questions. I'm going to read them. My advice would be you spend 10 minutes on them, pause the video, try not to look back in your book because I want to see how much you actually remember. If you do look back in your book at the end of this, then read to react it in red pen, but don't put the answers because at the end of the day, you'll only be cheating yourself. So, give 2 ways the Reichstag fire helped Hitler consolidate his power. Give 3 ways, not how 3 ways. Give 3 ways Hitler had the Enabling Act passed. What did Hitler ban after the Enabling Act? Give 2 things. Give 2 ways the Night of the Long Knives helped Hitler get more power secure, so get his power more secure. What does propaganda mean? Who was the head of Nazi propaganda? Give 5 ways propaganda tried to control the population, so specifics. So in that question, I will give you 1 mark here, but you've got to add to it. So instead of saying the Nazis banned books, tell me the people they banned books from and what they did to those books. What was the Reich Church? Give 2 ways Martin Niemöller was a threat to the Nazis. Give 3 groups that were part of Hitler's police state. So there's 10 questions there. Pause the video here and spend the first 10 minutes of the lesson doing this, and then we'll move on. But this must be done because these will be checked when you return to school. Right, so moving on to today's lesson. Now, today's lesson, it came up 2 years ago in the exam, and it was just this lesson that came up for nearly, over half of the marks on the paper. So that's why every lesson is absolutely vital. So in the years 1919 to 1933, it could be argued that women's lives were more progressive, meaning they had more rights, more chance at political jobs, and they also had the choice to do whatever job they wanted. Now, today's lesson, we need to assess how much their lives changed under the Nazis and explain why. So, first task, in a spider diagram, write the title, Women Before Hitler. And I want you to write down as much as you remember about women's lives before Hitler came to power. So think about what women's lives were like during the golden years and give me specific facts about what their life was like, because we need to be able to assess how their lives had changed. But to do that, we need to look at what their lives had changed from. So 5 to 7 minutes, focus on what women's lives were like before Hitler. If you want to have a look back in your book at the Stresemann, the women lesson we did, then please do. But add as many facts as you can about what women's lives were like before Hitler came to power. Right, so women before Hitler, I've got 10 things here. If you haven't got them, please add them to your spider diagram. The key word here, though, and I think all of you need to write this, is that women's lives in this period before Hitler were progressive. Not fully progressive, but massively different because they had more rights, more chance at political jobs, and they also could do whatever job they wanted to a degree. So what were women like before Hitler? So firstly, women over 20 could vote, which was more advanced compared to other European countries such as the UK, where the age was 21. 10% of the Reichstag were women. Women could go out in public without men, drink, smoke, and swear. Women were allowed to wear sexually revealing clothes. Women took up careers in government and as teachers and doctors, and by 1933 there were 100,000 women teachers and 3,000 female doctors. Women were also allowed to have their hair cut short and wear makeup. By 1932, 112 women had been elected to the Reichstag, and in 1932, almost 10% of the Reichstag were women, as mentioned above. But remember, by 1933, the Reichstag basically didn't exist. Women were progressive, meaning they made progress in their lives and had freedom. The new woman brought more clothes and went out more. They expressed their independence by their behavior. As I've mentioned in the previous bullet points, they wore more makeup, more jewelry, more sexually revealing clothes. They smoked, they drank, they went out without men. Some seemed less interested in marriage and families, and they took advantage of liberal sexual attitudes which had developed during the war. And the birth rate was falling, and the divorce rate was increasing. Now, for Hitler, this is a massive problem. Because if you are Hitler, then this is a term that you all need to write down. Hitler wanted to create a 1,000-year Reich, which basically means he wanted his empire to last for 1,000 years. So Hitler had this long-term plan, but without the birth rate going up, the Nazis were going to find it very difficult to actually increase their Reich. So women were actually an important part to Nazi policy. So Hitler had to make women feel important to the grand scheme of the Nazi regime. So we need to look at how this changed. So the second task we're going to do is the Nazi expectations of women. So I want you to draw an outline of a person, very similar to what I've got on the board. And I want you to read the information and draw around your woman what the Nazis expected women to be. So in the so your subheading is Nazi expectations of women. Draw an outline of a person. I don't mind if it's a sick person. And then read the information that I'm about to go through and write down 10 facts about what the Nazis expected women to be. So I'm going to underline some key things here. I'll read it, and then my advice would be to spend 5 to 10 minutes. So the Nazis had very old-fashioned views of women in society. They emphasized the differences between men and women and believed that nature had created each for a different purpose. They believed men should be breadwinners and earn a living to support their families. A man's role was that of a worker or a soldier. Men were also responsible for the decision-making and providing protection. The Nazis believed that a woman's role in life was to bear many children and ensure the domestic comfort of their family, so cooking and cleaning. Women were expected to be dependent on men both financially and emotionally, and to obey their husbands. Women should not be involved in politics, the Nazis believed. They soon took away women's right to vote. The Nazis also felt it was wrong for women to enter paid employment for 2 reasons. Firstly, they are neglecting their family. And secondly, every woman in a job was taking a job from a man. That's the first thing, the Nazis' expectations of women. In terms of physical appearance, then the ideal physical appearance of a woman was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and sturdily built. She was expected to have broad hips for childbearing and to have no interest in fashion, makeup, or slimming. So blonde-haired, blue-eyed, sort of maybe big-built woman. She should wear a full skirt, flat heels, and no makeup. She should wear home-produced materials and not imported wool, cotton, or silk. So basically, she should wear items that are made in Germany. And she should cook using leftovers. So women were also told that cooking with leftovers was really important to help prepare for war. There was no question of equality under the Nazis. Women were squeezed out of jobs soon after Hitler came to power. 15% of the teachers were sacked, and new female teachers were not appointed. All women doctors and civil servants were sacked, and women were forbidden from becoming judges or lawyers as they were considered too emotional. So women were told that they couldn't become judges because they were just too emotional. They'd get too emotionally involved. In public, women should behave in a ladylike manner, no smoking. So there were posters put up in restaurants forbidding women to smoke, basically making it look criminalized. And they should bring up their children to worship the Führer and join the Hitler Youth. There's lots there. So if you try to write 10 facts about what the Nazis expected of women, spend 5 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to look at a bit further how the Nazis encouraged women to have more children and to prevent non-Aryan children from basically being born. So pause the video here. 10 facts about Nazi expectations of women. Okay, so How did the Nazis convince women to have more children and stop the master race being weakened? So it says here the birth rate in Germany was dropping alarmingly. Hitler wanted his empire to last for 1,000 years, and if the birth rate continued to drop like this, it wouldn't happen. So the Nazis tried to convince women to have as many children as possible, to do as they needed to use propaganda and persuasion to make women feel special and the most important group in development of the master race. So you need to create a table. On one column, how did the Nazis encourage more births? On the other column, how did the Nazis prevent weakening the master race? I'm going to talk through each of these, and as I talk, summarize it in your table. But again, it's quite important that we understand that women were seen as vitally important to this creation of the 1,000-year Reich. So, complete the table as I talk. First column, how did the Nazis encourage more births? And how did second column, how did the Nazis prevent weakening the master race? So I'm going to go through the encouragement of birth first. The 3 Ks, Kinder, Kirche, Küche, children, church, and cooking. They were the 3 roles of women to encourage them to have more babies. Generous marriage loans of 1,000 marks were given to married couples. So if you got married, you would be given a loan of 1,000 marks, which was the equivalent to about 9 months' wages. Now, after each child was born, 25% of the loan would be scrapped. So after 4 children, you wouldn't have to pay anything back. That was a way for the Nazis to get people to have more children, to remove the burden of having that loan. In Nazi Germany, if you wanted to be called a family, only households with 4 or more children could be called a family. If you had less than 4 children, you weren't classed as a family in Germany. Special awards were created. Now, this was on Hitler's mother's birthday, and it was the Honor Cross. Now, this is a really important key term here. And the Honor Cross was given to mothers every year to celebrate how many children they had. So women who had 4 children would be given a bronze medal. Those that had 6 children would receive a silver medal, and those with 8 children would receive the gold medal. Now, those with 10 children, I'm going to add this here because it doesn't actually say. Those with 10 children be given the platinum. And also, Hitler would be the godfather of that 10th child. And if it was a boy, you had to name the child Adolf. Now, some people are probably sitting here thinking I'm making that up, but it definitely isn't made up. The Nazis were that controlling in regards to women, but also don't forget that by having a ceremony, giving the women medals, it makes them feel important. And women openly wore these medals to sort of celebrate their part in the creation of the 1,000-year Reich, the master race. Young women, especially newly married, could attend mothercraft and homecraft classes. In 1938, any married couples who failed to produce children were encouraged to divorce and try again with someone else. So if you weren't having children, divorce them, try again. And in 1936, the Nazis began a breeding experiment called Lebensborn. Fit, healthy, single Aryan women were encouraged to visit Lebensborn Center, where they could meet with SS soldiers in a bid to encourage couples to have more Aryan children. If you were to have a Lebensborn child, you could be given money by the Nazis to look after that child, or you could pass your child over to the state that would be looked after and brought up as a dedicated Nazi. So Lebensborn was basically a way of encouraging single women to have a child without the expectation of getting married. So that's how the Nazis encouraged births. Some people might sit here and think this is crazy. This is exactly what the Nazis tried to do. It was a way of indoctrination. But how did they stop the master race from being weakened? So laws against abortion were strictly enforced. Birth control clinics were closed down and contraception was banned. This was to increase the number of children, but also to stop the master race from being weakened. Welfare support and marriage loans were restricted to Aryans only. So you couldn't get this loan of 1,000 marks unless you were an Aryan couple. In 1933, the Nazis began a program of compulsory sterilization for all people suffering from blindness, deafness, and any physical disability, epilepsy, depression, or alcoholism. So compulsory sterilisation is basically stopping you from having children. And by 1937, 200,000 compulsory sterilisations had been carried out. A lot of this on women. 1935 marriage law required a fitness to marry certificate. So if you didn't have the fitness to marry certificate, you couldn't bear children. And in 1935, the law for the protection of German blood and honour, the Nuremberg laws, banned any marriage or sexual relations between Aryans and Jews, also black people and gypsies. In the same year, people suffering from any infectious or hereditary diseases were also banned from marrying or having sexual relations with Aryan people. This was a way for the Nazis to make sure that the children that were being born were going to be strong Aryan children, so that Hitler genuinely believed that he could have this Aryan race. And he believed that his country could be based around purely bred Aryan people. So by preventing the weakening of the master race, it was in turn going to help Hitler build his 1,000-year master race Reich. So make sure you've got as much of that down as possible. It's important that we have an understanding. If you've got any questions about that, just let me know. But this is what Hitler tried to do to encourage women to have more babies and encourage them not to basically have children that were non-Aryan. So task 4 of today's lesson is how successful were the Nazi policies? Write down that title and draw this table and add information to the table. Successful, not successful. So here are the statements. A minority of women were unhappy at being forced out of work. Women were banned from professional posts such as teachers, doctors, and civil servants. Is that a success or a failure? Well, it's a failure because lots of women were unhappy at being forced out of work. Some of them did not want to be childbearing. Women were made to feel vitally important to Germany and the future of the 1,000-year Reich. Some women believe that the Nazis' ideas degraded women. So degraded means makes them look weak. The birth rate did not go up to 2 million a year. Hitler wanted it to go up to 2 million a year. It only went up to 1.5 million. But it was 1 million before that. So it went up to 1.5 million, but Hitler wanted it to be 2 million a year. By 1937, the Nazis needed more women back to work and prepare for the Second World War. They needed women to be work and to be mothers. Now, by 1937, a lot of women were back in work, working in textile factories, preparing for the war. So women had to sort of be mothers and workers while a lot of men were preparing for the war. Sometimes the pressure to have children was so high that some women would kidnap other women's babies to get what they wanted. Hitler had massive support from women as he received thousands of letters asking him to be the father to many women's children. So put that in the table that you've got, this table here. Write down if it's successful or not successful, and then just write a short conclusion. Were the policies towards women a success or a failure? That's all you'll need to know for this. Now, we will be doing an exam on women, okay? So it's really important that you have an understanding of this question, and you will be doing a useful question, difference between interpretations, why they were different, and how far you agree. That'll be done in an hour. So it is important that you totally understand this lesson. Remember, it came up 2 years ago, so it is vitally important, okay? There is a YouTube video about how to answer the questions. So it is more about structure that I'm looking for, because come the exam in June the 2nd, it is important that the structure for the Germany paper is absolutely nailed down to a fine-tooth comb, because that will be the difference between getting a grade 4 on it and getting a grade probably 7 to 9. Because you can get 12 marks without even knowing anything. So if we can do the rest of the questions pretty well, then the results will speak for themselves.